The forgotten inventor who revolutionized flight, Samuel Pierpont Langley and the Smithsonian Century of Silence. The year is 1903. The headlines are waiting to be written. America and the world is poised on the edge of the aerial age. This story doesn't start in the Wright brothers' workshop. It begins in the grand halls of the Smithsonian, where Samuel Pierpont Langley, America's most powerful scientist, believed he would conquer the skies. With money, prestige, and government backing, he had everything the humble Wrights lacked. But what if the Smithsonian spent decades promoting him over the true inventors of flight? The Titan of the Treasury Building. Samuel Pierpont Langley was born in 1834, a man destined for greatness. From a young age, he showed a brilliance that spanned mathematics, engineering, and astronomy. His early career led him to direct the Allegheny Observatory in Pittsburgh, where he created the bolometer, a device so sensitive it could measure the faint heat from the moon or the sun's energy with incredible precision. Langley's work in solar physics earned him worldwide recognition, but he was not content to observe the heavens above. In 1887, he became the third secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, placing him at the pinnacle of American science. With government resources at his disposal and public prestige, he turned his attention from the stars above to the sky above, the dream of human flight. Langley had experimented with flight since the 1880s, but now it became a full-scale, government-backed project, the Aerodrome. He had the funding, engineers, and an advanced 52-horsepower engine for his full-size flying machine. He also built and tested small, steam-powered models, which successfully flew on the Potomac River in 1896, thrilling the public and confirming his ideas. Yet there was a crucial problem Langley overlooked: control. He focused on lift and power, but underestimated the need to master three-axis control: pitch, roll, and yaw. Far away in Dayton, Ohio, the Wright brothers were quietly perfecting this problem. Using their knowledge of bicycles and mechanics, they developed a system of wing warping and rudder control, solving the central challenge of flight. Langley, confident in his prestige and the backing of the Smithsonian, pressed forward with the great Aerodrome, while the Wrights continued their modest private experiments. The stage was set. A dramatic confrontation between a powerful scientific institution and two determined inventors from a bicycle shop, each racing toward the dream of human flight.
Part 2. The Spectacular Failure and the Silent Triumph. In 1903, American flight faced a critical test. While the Wright brothers quietly prepared their modest machine in North Carolina, Samuel Pierpont Langley readied his massive great Aerodrome on the Potomac River. The machine was enormous, with a tandem-wing biplane design, a 48-foot wingspan, and a weight of 850 pounds. It was powered by the 52-horsepower Manley Balzer engine, far more powerful than the 12-horsepower engine built by the Wrights. Langley, determined to claim the glory for the government, arranged a secretive launch from a hoatboat near Quantico, Virginia. On October 7th, his chief assistant, Charles Manley, climbed into the small cockpit and the catapult was triggered. But the result was catastrophic. Instead of soaring, the Aerodrome plunged nose first into the cold Potomac River. A wing or wire snagged on the launch rail, the structure twisted and collapsed, and Manley was pulled out, nearly drowning but largely unharmed. The press had been alerted to witness a historic moment and instead saw a fiasco. Headlines mocked the secretary, the Smithsonian, and the $70,000 investment, calling it Langley's Folly. Not discouraged, Langley repaired the machine and attempted a second flight on December 8th. This time, the launch apparatus was slightly modified, but disaster struck again. The rear control surfaces failed, the Aerodrome broke apart mid-flight, and Langley was trapped beneath the wreckage before being rescued. The machine disintegrated, and the government withdrew further funding. Langley had the money, the engine, and the right moment, but he lacked one crucial element: control. His massive machine could generate lift, but could not be manipulated safely in the dynamic air. It relied on static equilibrium, while the Wrights were perfecting dynamic control. Just 9 days later, on December 17th, in Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina, history was quietly made. Orville and Wilbur Wright, after years of gliding experiments, wind tunnel tests, and refining wing warping for roll control, were ready. They had solved the riddle of three-axis control. At 10:35 a.m., Orville flew the Wright Flyer for 12 seconds, covering 120 feet. Later, Wilbur flew for 59 seconds, covering 852 feet. For the first time, heavier-than-air, controlled, sustained flight had been achieved. And it was not by the scientific monarch in Washington, but by two bicycle mechanics from Dayton. The contrast could not have been clearer. Funding. Langley had $70,000 from the U.S. War Department and the Smithsonian. The Wrights used only $1,000 from their bicycle shop. Control. Langley relied on static stability, which failed. The Wrights used three-axis control with wing warping and a rudder. Engine. Langley's engine produced 52 horsepower. The Wrights' engine produced 12. Outcome. Langley's Aerodrome crashed into the river. The Wright Flyer achieved controlled, sustained flight. Inventor. Langley was a world-famous scientist and Smithsonian secretary. The Wright Flyer was built by two bicycle mechanics from Dayton. Langley learned of the Wrights' success, but its significance did not immediately register. The Wrights kept their achievement quiet initially, securing patents and perfecting their design. For Samuel Pierpont Langley, the December 1903 failures marked the end of his public career. His health declined, and he died on February 27, 1906, still believing that with a little more time and money, his Aerodrome could have flown. He passed away unaware of the full, revolutionary impact of the Wright brothers' flights.
Part 3. The Smithsonian's Betrayal and the Curse of Glenn Curtiss. The Rise of a Rival. After Langley died in 1906, the Wright brothers worked quietly. They perfected their flyer, secured patents, and negotiated with foreign governments. By 1908 and 1909, their demonstration flights dazzled their American public. They were celebrated as heroes, and their place in history seemed secure. But the aviation industry was growing fast. Competition, especially over patents for three-axis control, became fierce. The Wrights demanded licensing fees and sued anyone using their wing warping system. Their biggest rival was Glenn Hammond Curtiss, a motorcycle racer turned aircraft builder. Curtiss made excellent planes, but he faced lawsuits from the Wrights. His strategy was simple: prove someone else had flown before 1903. If he could, the Wright patent would be invalid. The unholy alliance. Curtiss needed a pre-1903 precedent. The Smithsonian needed to protect Langley's reputation. Together, they formed a secret alliance. In 1914, the Smithsonian loaned the disassembled 1903 Aerodrome to Curtiss. Officially, it was for testing and exhibition. In truth, the plan was darker. Modify the Aerodrome, fly it, and claim it had been capable of sustained flight in 1903. The Aero Fraud of Hammondsport. At Curtiss's workshop in Hammondsport, New York, the Aerodrome was rebuilt. The changes were dramatic. Modern control system. Rudder and controls were replaced. Ailerons were added. Structural reinforcement. The frame was strengthened. New engine. A modern, more powerful engine replaced the original. taping and sealing. Leaks and weaknesses were fixed. On May 28, 1914, Curtiss piloted the heavily modified Aerodrome. It successfully made short hops and flights over Keuka Lake. The Smithsonian's claim. The Smithsonian immediately declared the Aerodrome the first machine in history capable of sustained free flight with a man. They ignored the fact that the original 1903 machine had crashed spectacularly. They omitted the significant 1914 modifications. The statement was a masterclass in institutional spin, a direct challenge to the Wrights. The Wrights retaliated. Wilbur had died in 1912, leaving Orville to defend their legacy. Orville tried reasoning with the Smithsonian. He pointed out the dozens of non-Langley modifications. He demanded a retraction. The Smithsonian refused. Faced with stubborn denial, Orville took drastic action. In 1928, he sent the original 1903 Wright flyer to London. It went to the Science Museum, under loan. He attached a note. The flyer would not return until the Smithsonian recognized it as the first controlled, sustained, manned heavier-than-air flight. For more than a decade, the world's most important airplane remained abroad. It became a silent symbol of the bitter feud between the true inventors and the institution that tried to steal their credit.
Part 4. The Retraction and the Return of the Flyer. A Legacy on Hold. From 1928 until the 1940s, the original 1903 Wright flyer rested in the Science Museum in London. Its exile was a constant, humiliating reminder of the Smithsonian Institution's stubbornness. To the American public, it symbolized a national museum prioritizing the defense of a failed bureaucrat, Samuel Langley, over the recognition of the Wright brothers, the true inventors of flight. Pressure mounted to bring the flyer home. World War II intensified national pride and focus on technological history. Orville Wright, now an elder statesman of aviation, maintained his strict stance. The role of Charles Lindbergh. In the 1940s, influential figures began quietly lobbying the Smithsonian. Among them was Charles A. Lindbergh, the famous aviator who had flown solo across the Atlantic. He admired the Wrights and saw the injustice of the Smithsonian's position. His support, along with wartime pressure, nudged the institution toward resolution. The departure of Charles G. Abbott, who had overseen the Smithsonian during its most aggressive cover-up, opened the door. The new leadership was ready to correct the historical record. The defining report and official retraction was issued in October 1942. It was a public, full-scale admission of the Smithsonian's decades-long error. Key points of the retraction: the 1903 Aerodrome, as designed and tested by Langley, could not sustain flight. The 1914 Curtiss flights required major alterations to the machine's structure and controls. The Smithsonian retracted all prior claims that Langley's machine was the first capable of sustained free flight. The 1903 Wright Flyer was officially recognized as the first man-carrying airplane capable of sustained flight under its own power. Orville Wright's principled exile was finally vindicated. He had forced the nation's leading scientific institution to admit it had misrepresented history for 40 years. The triumphant return home. With the Smithsonian's public retraction, the terms of the loan were fulfilled. Orville formally requested the flyers returned from London. World War II delayed the journey, but eventually the plane could come home. Orville Wright died in January 1948, secure in his legacy, though he never saw the flyer return. In November 1948, the flyer arrived in the United States. On December 17th, the 45th anniversary of the first flight, it was formally presented to the Smithsonian. The flyer was displayed first in the Arts and Industries Building. Later, it was placed in the National Air and Space Museum, where it now hangs in the Milestones of Flight Hall. A small plaque reads, "By stipulation of the executors of the estate of Orville Wright, the Smithsonian Institution has publicly recognized the Wright brothers as the true inventors of the airplane." It stands as a silent reminder, a tribute to the Wrights' achievement, and a lesson on the importance of historical truth.
Conclusion: The legacy of the forgotten inventor. Samuel Pierpont Langley was not a fraud. He was a brilliant scientist, an administrative titan, and a dedicated pioneer. His successful unmanned model flights proved that heavier-than-air flight was possible. He solved the problems of lift and power. Yet his failure came from hubris and a lack of control. Langley neglected the necessity of dynamic control. He allowed his immense prestige to blind him to the innovative work of two obscure mechanics in Dayton, Ohio, the Wright brothers. The true historical tragedy lies not with Langley alone, but with the institution he led. The Smithsonian chose to protect Langley's reputation. It publicly promoted a modified post-facto version of his failed machine. In doing so, it attempted to erase the achievement of the Wright brothers. This is one of the most astonishing institutional scandals in American scientific history. The story of the forgotten inventor who revolutionized flight is more than a tale of who flew first. It is a profound narrative about the conflict between establishment authority and grassroots genius. It is a story about the struggle to ensure history records the truth, no matter how inconvenient or costly to institutional pride. Today, the Wright Flyer hangs in Washington, D.C. It stands as a monument to innovation and a powerful testament to intellectual honesty. It is a testament that Orville Wright fought for until his dying day.